Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to trace the incredible, decades-long journey of an idea. How India, even before it was independent, fought for the right to write its own rulebook. We're talking about the fight to create its very own constitutional assembly. You know, this famous line just perfectly captures the spirit of this whole struggle. It was this persistent, unwavering belief in one idea: a constituent assembly. It started out as just a whisper, but with sheer determination, it grew into this undeniable demand for a nation to finally have its own voice. Okay, let's dive right in. So this call for self-rule didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It actually started with the vision and, honestly, the courage of some really bold individuals, long before it became this big national political movement. For nearly 30 years, this idea just kept growing and gaining momentum. It was championed by some of India's most iconic early leaders, right? Each one kind of passed the torch to the next, adding their voice, their weight, and pushing this idea from the fringes right into the mainstream. And this is where things get really interesting. The idea starts to get serious. It evolves from these powerful individual voices into the official stance of organized political parties. And once that happened, it became a formal objective that the British just couldn't ignore anymore. This was a huge deal. It's one thing for a person to have an idea, but it's a whole other ballgame when a political party adopts it. The Swaraj Party basically transformed it from a philosophical concept into a concrete political goal, something you could actually fight for. Now, this slide makes a really important distinction. Tilak's early call was absolutely groundbreaking, but it was seen as his personal idea. Decades later, when M.M. Roy makes the demand, it's different. He's not just speaking for himself. He's speaking as the head of a national party, which gives the call this official weight it never had before. And then, the real game changer, the Indian National Congress jumps in. When they made it their official demand in 1935, it became the central issue of the freedom struggle. And then Nehru, in 1938, takes it a step further with this really revolutionary proposal. He wasn't just asking for an assembly, he was demanding a democratic one, chosen by all the people. So you've got all these major Indian parties demanding the same thing, right? But Britain, they're basically just ignoring it. That is, until a devastating global conflict completely changes the balance of power. And just like that, the tables were turned. Britain desperately needed India's soldiers, its resources, its support for the war. This gave Indian leaders this incredible new leverage they'd been waiting for to really push their demands. So Britain tries to compromise, but they offered these half measures. First, the August offer, then the Cripps mission. But Indian leaders were just done with vague promises. They rejected both offers flat out. The message was loud and clear. We're not settling for anything less than the power to write our own constitution. So the war ends, and there's this huge political shakeup back in Britain. And suddenly, the door that had been slammed shut for decades, well, it starts to creak open. The demand that had been rejected for so long was finally about to become a reality. And this was the reason why. A new government, the Labour Party, wins the election in the UK. The new Prime Minister, Clement Attlee, was much more open to the idea of Indian independence than his predecessor, Winston Churchill, and he moved pretty quickly. So Attlee dispatched 3 of his top guys to India. Their mission wasn't to delay or deflect anymore. It was to create a real, workable plan for how to form this constituent assembly. The dream was finally taking shape. So after a 50-year struggle, the question wasn't if anymore, it was how. How do you actually build this thing? The cabinet mission laid out this detailed blueprint, and the huge process of bringing it to life started in the summer of 1946. So let's take a look at the architecture of this incredible body. Day landed on this number, 389. And you might think, why 389? Well, it wasn't just pulled out of a hat. This was the magic number they calculated to create a body that was a true reflection of undivided India, with a voice for its huge population and its complex politics. And this chart breaks it down perfectly. You basically had 2 Indias back then, right? You had British India, the parts directly governed by Britain. That got the bigger slice, 296 members. And then you had the semi-independent princely states, and they would send the other 93. Okay, so let's zoom in on that bigger chunk from British India. Even that was divided up. The vast majority, 292, came from the 11 big governors' provinces. You can think of them as the major states of the time. Then a small group of 4 came from these key territories called the Chief Commissioners' Provinces, which were run directly from the center.
And for those 4 key provinces, there's actually a pretty neat trick to remember them. Just think A, B, C, D. Ajmer, Baluchistan, Kurk, and Delhi. Each one of these territories got to send one representative to the assembly.
So the main point here is that it wasn't a one-size-fits-all system. Representation was all based on population, which led to some huge differences. For example, the United Provinces, which is modern-day Uttar Pradesh, sent the most members of any province, with 55. And among the princely states, my source sent the biggest group with 7 representatives. And that really sets up the biggest question of all, doesn't it? You've got 389 members from completely different regions, religions, and political beliefs. How on earth could they possibly come together and forge a single constitution for a new nation? Well, that incredible challenge, that epic story, that's something we'll have to save for another explainer.